to Distance Education. My name is Greg Weaver, and this is ENG4E, Grade 12 Workplace English. I'd like to welcome everyone listening across the north today at home, your learning center, or on Bell Expressview. To call and join our class, you can call 1-800-465-7144 or 737-4017 or 2983 in the Sioux Lookout, Lac Seul, or Dryden areas. Let's welcome everyone back to class today. What we are doing today is we're going to be finishing off with lesson number 7, as well as starting lesson 8. Now, when I was away yesterday, I am hoping that you had a chance to at least finish reading to the end of chapter 17. If you are having a bit of difficulty with this with all the time, be sure to let me know, and we can set up a bit of a modified schedule for you to get all the work done. Also, want to remind you to please hand in whatever work you have completed. There is a couple of students who have had a couple things in, but most students have handed anything in. So please hand in whatever you can as soon as you can. So we're going to pick up where we left off on Monday, and we were looking at key question 23 and 24. And when we started looking at those, we looked at where some of the relationships in the novel, and we did a couple of examples of that, as well as looking at 3 ways that Tiffany could improve her life and feed the good wolf that we look at in the prologue. And through she could continue down the path she's on and feed the evil or do bad actions, activities, things like that. So that's what we looked at on Monday. We're picking up a key question 25 today. This looks at chapters 12 to 17. So to ensure that you write in proper sentence form for these, you need to have more than just one sentence. These should be ideally between 3 and 4 sentences each, depending on how many questions or how many marks the question is worth. If the question is worth more marks, you should have more points or more points of evidence to go along with it. So we have 6 questions here. Number 1 says, why are Darla and Kim, Tiffany's friends, why are they suspicious of Tony's feelings for Tiffany? What advice would you give her if you were her friend? So remember with that, they think that Tony is cheating on her and that he's using her. What do you think? What advice would you give Tiffany in the situation if you were her friend? Number 2 is, why is there tension between Otter Lake and Bay Meadow? Now this question, there's no specific sense you can look at in these chapters. Just look at the attitudes that both Tony and Tiffany have, as well as their parents and their friends. Why is there tensions between the two communities? Number 3 says, when Tiffany thinks about her destiny, what does she fear the most? What's she worried about the most? This when she's talking with Darla and Kim on the picnic table. Number 4, and this comes up in chapter 16. which we didn't read together, but read on your own. It says, what were Pierre's reasons for sneaking away from home? Number 5 says, what secret did Tiffany keep which made her father trust her less? Why do you think she kept it a secret? And how would you react if you were her parent? So that ties back in a couple chapters tying there. And we're looking at Tiffany's progress report that Keith finds in her room when looking for batteries when the power was out. So why did she kept it a secret? So what were some of the reasons? Those are pretty clear in the novel. And then another question part of that is, how would you react if you were her parent? How would you react in that situation? And that's worth 5 marks. And then number 6, explain Midnight's reaction to Pierre back in chapter 12. What happens and why do you think the dog acts that way towards Pierre Lariat? So think about those questions and do your best to get answers. If you have any questions you're not sure, let me know, and we can work through some of these together. And then chapter 26 is pretty straightforward. You're going to keep working on your double entry journal. And you want to try and get, once again, probably 3 to 4 quotes from these chapters that describe Tiffany and what all about her. I just want to keep these just in your notebook as we keep going. And at the end of lesson 9, you will hand these in for marking at the end of that. So that leads us into chapter 8. So we're going to look at chapters 18 to 22 of the novel. So we're getting into a lot more detail, getting towards the climax, or the big event that kind of is what the whole novel's building towards. So we're going to look at that, as well as the different types of conflict that were occurring in the novel. Once we have done that, you will give some advice to the characters on how they can better handle the conflicts that they are involved in. So I want to do first, I want to look at the novel again. I don't want to look at the conflict stuff until we get through parts of the novel. And then we'll work through key questions 27 and 28. We may or may not get to that today. If not, we'll get to that tomorrow. So we're going to start looking at chapter 18. Now, in case I had a chance to finish reading what was in chapters 15, 16, and 17. Chapter 15 is when Tiffany encounters Pierre as she runs home from that meeting with, or that encounter with Darla and Kim. And then chapter 16 is Dale and Chuck are 2 characters we meet. And it's Pierre's interactions with them and other people he meets in Otter Lake. And then chapter 17 is a big fight between Keith and Tiffany over that progress report that she hid from him. And so that was the that was the chapters that we didn't read together. So we're going to lesson 18 here. So it ends with Tiffany storming out of the house, calling Tony to pick her up, and it comes picture and they take off. So chapter 18 says Tony had been strangely quiet as they pulled into the restaurant parking lot at the edge of the reserve. Tiffany had thanked him for picking her up on such short notice and so late, but he only gave a weak smile in return. Around his neck, he still wore the weaker root out of habit. The weird thing was, there was just a faint hint of something girlish coming from him, like perfume. Maybe he was using a new soap, she thought. Man, am I glad you could get out of there. My dad's been giving me so much grief over my marks and everything else. Hey, let's all go home tonight. Let's just drive around and see what this country does at dawn. If I'm in trouble, I might as well make it worth my while. She's excited and pumped for an evening who knows what. Maybe, Tony replied as he turned off the car radio. Is something wrong? She asked. Before answering, he looked at her and gave her a sad smile. What is it? Nothing, it's just... I don't know. He answered as he got out of the car. Intensely concerned, Tiffany followed suit. They began walking towards the restaurant. After the way her evening had been going, Tiffany was afraid to probe any deeper. Once inside Gretchen's German food extravaganza, they sat at a small booth in the back. The place catered more to passing truckers than to teenage relationships in flux. Nobody in recent memory knew who Gretchen was, and there was nothing vaguely worth the title extravaganza coming out of the kitchen. But at least it was open. They were alone in the restaurant, except for a bearded trucker heavy into his fourth mug of coffee and second bowl of chili. Outside, his rig was parked in the far left of the lot, a big 18-wheeler hauling 400 cases of thesauruses. Right away, the waitress, Sally Ann, approached. What do you two have? You could tell this is the 13,000th time she'd asked that today. By routine, Tiffany and Tony ordered one Coke, one Diet Coke, and a plate of fries. Tiffany once again played with her bracelet on her wrist. Tony, Darla, and Kim told me that Julie had a bracelet just like mine, except hers was gold. Tony didn't respond. Was it the one that you said you bought with your mother using my card? Tiffany, oh geez, man, I hate this. Tony scrubbed in his seat. He was clearly uncomfortable. Why? Tiffany was afraid to ask, but the answer seemed obvious. It didn't fit my mother. That was the best he could do, thought Tiffany. So you gave it to Julie instead? She had clearly overrated him. Well, you see, you gotta understand. What do I have to understand? Tony took a deep breath. Tiffany, this is so hard. It really is. People are talking. My parents are saying things. I know your dad is. Going out shouldn't be this difficult. What's difficult about it? I don't understand what is so difficult. Once more, Tony took a deep breath. Well, for one thing, does your father pay income taxes? Tiffany, for a second, wasn't sure she heard correctly. What? Income taxes. Does your father pay them? My father keeps talking about the thing with their status card, He says guys get a lot of freebies. My father hates that. He thinks all Canadians should pay taxes. I have to pay taxes for the work I do and for my father. I'm only 17. I don't think it's right that your dad or you don't have to. Once more, Tiffany was trying to understand what was going on. Her head was swimming, trying to grasp the reality of the conversation. You're arguing with me over taxes. I don't know anything about taxes. This is ridiculous. And then it clicked in. It was so clear, so obvious, and so desperate. You don't care about all that stuff either. It's what your friends have been saying about me, isn't it? That's what all this is about. Silently. Till looked out the windows, Tiffany watched him, waiting for an answer. Tiffany finally found her voice. What are you trying to tell me, Tony? The waiters showed up with their drinks. Sally-Ann could tell this was a case of young love past its prime. And were she a decade or so younger, and had been on her feet for 7 hours straight with 3 more to go, she might have cared. Clearing his throat, Tony looked Tiffany straight in the eyes. For 2 seconds, before looking out the window again. I think we should go our separate ways. It's not working out. Just then Tiffany caught a glimmer of realization. She followed it to its logical conclusion. Is that what you think? What does Julie think about all this? That caught the young man's attention. What? It was all becoming obvious to Tiffany. Horribly obvious. You're seeing Julie now, aren't you? Tiffany felt like such an idiot. That's probably Julie's perfume she smelled on Tony. That's you're breaking up with me, isn't it? Turned off. Don't be silly. Of course not. You're a little paranoid, Tiffany. Sally-Ann arrived with a fresh, steaming plate of fries. Any interest that Tiffany might have had in them evaporated. Tony looked uncomfortable, reluctant to meet her gaze. You prick! She spit out the words. Now, Tiffany, don't overreact. If you're grown about this, you'll find somebody else. Just have some fries and I'll give you a ride home. Tony's words had little effect. In fact, she found them kind of condescending. As with most upset people, the trendy of her voice, temper, and her blood pressure were all rising to the challenge. The boy across the cigarette burn Formica table had been the bright light at the end of her dark tunnel. Literally, her white knight in shining white armor. Or denim armor in this case. But now, he was dumping her at Gretchen's German food extravaganza. What was definitely making things worse, far worse, than all the heartbreak, was the potential of hearing her father say his hated words. I told you so. Tiffany would have suffered through 1,000 physics tests, kissed the ugliest boy in school, or washed her father's clothes, including his underwear, rather than give him a reason to gloat. Tiffany tried to find something witty or cruel to say to her betrayer, was already now stuffing his face with fries. But she reverted to her already accurate assessment. Frick. Tony squirmed in his seat. Right now, he wished he was in his car far away. Instead of sitting here, at the edge of a reserve containing 1,100 native people, breaking them the heart of a girl who was quite possibly related to half of them, and whose father shot a scarecrow effigy of him. Tiffany, not good at this stuff. It's for the best, okay? Out of a nervous habit, he kept ending his sentences, asking for confirmation that what he was doing was the right thing. The only problem was, he kept asking the wrong person. Don't make this difficult. Let's make this quick and painless as possible, okay? Do you want to go now? So upset. Tiffany weighed her options. The plate of fries sitting instantly in front of her provided with several courses of action. Throw them in his face. The result being great satisfaction. Throw them out the window. Less satisfaction. And evoking some sort of disturbing the peace, destroying private property charge. Be a bigger person and walk away. Extreme lack of satisfaction, but no criminal charges. Decisions, thought Tiffany. You're being awfully quiet, said her nervous now ex-boyfriend. Maybe we should have done this over the phone like he planned. Tiffany decided on option number 4, a recently and quickly conceived alternative. Getting up from her seat, she grabbed a plate of fries and the bottle of ketchup and started walking for the door, knowing something was up. Tony followed. Tiffany, where are you going? Talk to me. Tiffany? Paying no attention, Tiffany poured the entire contents of the ketchup bottle on the plate of fries. Sally Ann couldn't help but notice her customers moving about as she poured the trucker yet another cup of coffee. Plus, the fact that they were walking out without paying their bill, the girl carrying one of the diner's plates, and a bottle of the diner's finest ketchup. Sally Ann yelled to Tiffany, "Hey, come back here. That's Gretchen's plate. And I got your bill right here. You don't pay it? It comes out of my pocket." Intent on her mission, Tiffany kept walking, focused and silent. Sally Ann quickly ran out from behind the counter and followed Tony, who was following Tiffany out the door, all the time trying to get her attention. The trucker didn't care. He took a sip of his fresh coffee as Sally Ann disappeared outside. Once alone, he put a fistful of packaged sugar into his pocket. Out in the parking lot, and halfway to his car, Tony caught up with the marching Tiffany. "Come on, Tiff. Don't act this way. You don't want to do anything stupid, right?" Finally, Tiffany spoke. "Don't I?" "What exactly is your definition of stupid, Tony?" Sally Ann wasn't far behind them, though the 7 hours she'd been on her feet made it difficult. "Yo, buddy, here's your bill, and kid, give me back that plate." Again, Tiffany spoke. "You want the plate? Go and get it." Sally Ann recognized the girl's tone from several run-ins she'd had with her own daughters. She knew anything could happen next. And it did. The fall evening was still quite warm. On the way out of the village, Tiffany had kept her car window open to let the fresh breeze in. Tony's car was air-conditioned, but wasn't really warm enough to need it. So, as a result, the plate of French fries went sailing effortlessly through the open window to smash against Tony's closed window, scattering fries and ketchup throughout the light blue interior of his car in a kinetic explosion. A rearview mirror, fried food, condiment, and cheap crockery. Tony and Sally Ann stopped in their tracks. Tiffany turned to face them. Yep, option number 4 had definitely been the appropriate response. It was a pity they don't grade clever stuff like this in school, she thought. Now that felt good, said Tiffany. My car, stammered Tony. "You have to pay for that plate," contributed the shocked waitress. She paused for a second before adding, "and the fries." "Pay the lady, Tony," answered a very satisfied Tiffany. As an afterthought, Tony reached over and grabbed the Wika root dangling around Tony's neck and yanked it with all her might. A leather thong was notoriously hard to break and requires a considerable amount of effort. Tony's head bobbed like a squirrel landing on a skinny branch. Ow! He yelled as Tiffany turned around and walked away, stuffing the weaker root in her pocket with a few bits of Tony's skin attached as a bonus. Chapter 19. This is getting into some of the climax of the story here. All the important things happen pretty much in these next couple of chapters. So it says it was a long walk home for Tiffany. Needless to say, Tony did not offer her a ride back to the reserve. Nor did she ask for or want one. She could have phoned any number of relatives, but embarrassment prevented her. There was old Nishinabe saying, it's always better to walk home than be carried home. Besides, it would give her time to think and calm down. Theoretically, it shouldn't take her longer than an hour or so, depending on the enthusiasm of her walking. Tony was probably two-thirds of the way home by now. Or maybe he was over at Julia's already. Or if there was any justice in the world, he was sitting on top of his car as it floated near the far end of Otter Lake, having mysteriously gone off the road as he drove along Ruby Road. No, maybe he swerved to avoid hitting a deer. May have plowed into the water where he and his precious vehicle now floated. For all eternity. Yeah, she'd settle for that. So, under the growing moon, she made her way home. It had been a long time since she walked this far. She's just happy she was in those shoes Granny Ruth had bought her. Then her feet would really be hurting by now. As much as she hated to admit it, there was a beautiful quality to the night. During her long hike home, she thought she caught glimpses of bats dashing and darting through the darkness. Occasionally, she spotted a shooting star. But what to wish for? The last few days had been long, complicated, and a handful emotionally. And still, she didn't know what the world held for her. In another few years, she'd be out of school, and she'd hoped to see her future suddenly appear in a flash of inspiration. Her life's path laid out and organized. She heard it happen to other people frequently. Religious people hear God's calling. Artists and writers feel destined to do something artistic since childhood. But Tiffany was becoming worried that destiny had forgotten her along the way, just like Tony had. Now Tony was gone, just like her mother. Last she'd heard, Clyde was in Edmonton, starting a new life with what's-his-name. Maybe Tiffany was more like her mother than her father. After all, both ended up with white boyfriends. But Clyde's new relationship seemed to be working out. Ted, that was his name. Thinking of her mother depressed Tiffany even further. When the breakup first happened, Claudia had delicately proposed the idea of Tiffany moving in with her. While Tiffany's relationship with her father had never been as strong as with her mother, Claudia broke up the family. Therefore, she was the real villain in Tiffany's mind, no matter what she said in fights with her dad. Plus, Claudia had already indicated that she might leave Otter Lake, and that was unacceptable. All of Tiffany's friends were here, and the separation was embarrassing enough. For her mother, when she finally left the community for a new life. For a brief period, Claudia attempted to keep in touch, but it became pretty evident soon that neither Keith nor Tiffany were interested in maintaining communication. Tiffany missed her mom, even though, much like her dad, she didn't really understand what went wrong in their family. Sure, a whole bunch of kids in reserve in school had things that happened to them, but that was other people. Single parenting was a lot more popular around here than The Simpsons. Her dad had been hurt by Claudia's actions, but the pain and confusion of Claudia's departure had driven a wedge between them, and neither had been doing a good job moving that wedge. As a result, Tiffany was walking 4 miles home in the middle of the night, afraid and unwilling to call her father, while Keith, on the other hand, was sitting at the home considering the many different ways to punish her. As she kicked the pebble off the shoulder of the road, a bright glow appeared over the hill that had just crested. It meant a car was coming, probably returning from town. Wanting to escape further embarrassment, Tiffany jumped down to the ditch. The last thing she needed right now was some nosy relatives questioning about a particular late-night walk. As she held in the dirt and darkness, waiting for the car to pass, Tiffany couldn't help thinking how far she'd fallen in such a short period of time. Maybe tomorrow would be a better day, she hoped. The fortunate thing was, today had not yet finished. Pierre was running through the forest as fast as he could, which under most circumstances would be considered pretty fast. If human eyes could have seen him, there would have been perhaps a few words in English or Anishinaabe to describe his overland flight. His feet hit the pine-carpeted forest floor with barely a whisper of a misplaced needle. He moved like a shadow and left as much evidence. Speed, agility, and silence were his only companions. Fallen logs disappeared behind him. Gullies and fences were barely noticed. He cleared a small stream with the apparent ease of a frog rolling up the lake. He ran so quickly that even the bats envied his speed. It was the exhilaration of existence that pushed him on faster and faster. It was a feeling he had not felt in a long time. Air in his lungs, his heart pumping, almost made him feel alive. He ran past an errant deer without breaking a sweat, if he could sweat. But even men such as Pierre had limits, and he was fast approaching his. With almost no nourishment in several days, he was weaker than he had been in a long time, and it affected his endurance. His blood burned, and his stomach ached for sustenance. But he denied himself the luxury of his new nightly feeding. He had fed enough over the long years, and now a new dawn had risen in his existence. It was time for change. Pierre was determined to see his journey home in the end. Ceremonies must be performed, protocols must be followed before it was all over. Weakening, he began to slow down. The blur became more recognizable until finally Pierre came to a stop and leaned against an aging pine tree, trying to recover his breath. Half the tree was dead, filled with termite holes and displaying evidence of decades of massive woodpecker attacks. At best, they only had a few more winters left before gravity became stronger than its roots. One time that pine tree had been young, just like he had. Now they had both seen too much and lived through too many years. Maybe he had known that tree when he was young. Perhaps as a child he had tripped over it in play. Maybe he shot an arrow into it. Besides, he struggled to become a warrior. It was unimportant. The past was the past. Pierre had only long forgiven of the notion of changing the past. For it was a harsh mistress. It would change for no one. Only the present and the future were his to mold. Al was lonely. He sat in his room that he had for days and weeks and months, in this far-off land called France. The journey across the vast water called an ocean had been long. He had been made sick by the motion of the ship. And the journey to this hollow stone mountain was called a palace, had been long and arduous. The food, the clothes, the land, everything about this place was different. And Al had long ago become tired of different. He wanted to go home. He missed his family, he missed the beautiful nights, the laughter of his people, the village he had once thought of as boring. Over here, much as in Montreal, even the air smelled funny. But the young man was no way of getting home. It was much too far to walk, let alone swim. So here he sat in his room for long stretches of time, till he was beckoned by the king to wander among these strange people. They wanted us to talk Anishinaabe, sing some of their sacred songs, and prance around like some animal. They were strange people, these French. Owl thought of his parents, his sister, and all his friends and relatives, wondering if he would ever see them again. Slowly, little by little, the young boy was beginning to hate white people, hating them for what they'd done to him, what they had left him in this strange place. Why did they not let him return home? Wish there was only some way to get back. The only bright light in his now dismal life was a girl. He had seen her frequently from across the courtyard, and occasionally she brought him his food. She appeared to be about his age, but had light brown hair and striking green eyes. The different colored eyes of these white people never failed to amaze the young man. The longer Pierre stayed in his ancestral land, the more the memories came flooding back. But first things first, he had to find a place to hold the ceremony. He had come home with very specific needs and plans. This is his second night here, and he allowed himself the luxury of reveling in its past. But that time was over. Now it was time to move on. Once more, he scaled a tall tree, making it to the top in less time it had taken a squirrel. From atop the huge oak, he surveyed the surrounding area. Much had changed, but the earth had a longer memory than many of the trees. It changed much more reluctantly. To the north, he saw what he hoped to see, a large hill rising high as a tree canopy. It was a drumlin, an ancient tear-shaped reminder of the long past glaciers, lying a ways inland from the lake. At least the years had not changed that. If the drumline remained as memory pictured it, there would be a flat stone high up on the far side facing east. He had once prayed to the sun and the Great Spirit there an eternity ago, on his vision quest. On that day, he had had a vision become a man. The stone would do what he had in mind. He knew it had no longer use for such activities, but he hoped its sacredness would still be valued by local people. He would see. He'd make into that stony prominence in no time. Smiling, he jumped light to the top of the oak and landed on the carpet floor with barely a sound. Chapter 20. Tiffany made it home just past midnight. The house looked dark, and she had been sure her father would be up front with an axe or something. Luckily, her imagination was more dangerous than reality. She hoped her father had not found out about her little nocturnal exit at all, because she couldn't be sure. Quietly circling around the back of the house, she leaned on the stepladder against the wall just below the window. Before climbing up, she looped the clothesline rope she had kept hidden for such an emergency through one rung of the ladder, then through a railing near the back door, then up to her bedroom. Once inside her room, she gently knocked over the stepladder, pulling on the rope to drag the stepladder along the ground towards the back door. When it was close enough, she let go of one of the loops and pulled the other end, making the rope disappear completely back into her room, removing all evidence of her departure and disappearance. Their friend Darla had taught her that little trick. Not exactly James Bond stuff, but effective. Tired and angry and generally upset, Tiffany took her jacket off, wondering on what to do. She knew tomorrow would still be her progress report to deal with, which she'd been putting off for more than a week, and there was no Tony. All in all, she had a pretty bleak Sunday ahead of her. Exhausted, she fell back in her bed, a dull thump acknowledging her arrival. She lay there for a moment, briefly wondering if her mother had stayed, how things could be different. Would she be failing at school? Would her relationship with her father be awful? Would Tony still have dumped her? Would she have started going out with Tony in the first place? Hard to say. It's one of those questions best left to philosophers and science fiction writers. It was then she noticed her bedroom door was open. Tiffany was sure she had closed it before she left the house. Not much point in sneaking out if your door was wide open. All the world can see you snuck out. She got up to close it and saw, stuck to the door, another note. Instantly her stomach jumped into her throat, and all hopes of ever going old evaporated. In the last couple of days, she became realizing that no good could come from any notes left in this house. She read it by the light of her clock radio. Tomorrow morning, I want to talk to you, Dad. 9 seemingly innocent words, dripping with forewarning and danger. Tiffany knew sleep would not come easily tonight. And to take her last meal, traditional for her temperature, had been French fries, which, come to think of it, she never even got to eat. Life truly and completely did suck. A while later, unable to sleep, Tiffany did something she thought she'd never do. Buried in a small little pink box under her bed were some letters she had sworn she would never look at again. She never even wanted to acknowledge their existence. But these were desperate times, and she felt they called for desperate action. Slowly, just as the moon was beginning its journey to the far horizon, she pulled out a letter. It was the last piece of correspondence from her mother, and it ran about 5 months ago. Most of the world revolved around email, but Tiffany's mother, of a different generation and a different technology, still preferred to communicate the old-fashioned way. When it had arrived, Tiffany had crumpled the letter into a ball and thrown it into the garbage. Then she had retrieved it and put it in a little pink box. At the bottom of that letter was a phone number. An Alberta phone number. The phone rang several times before someone picked up. Hello? Came the puzzled, annoying, dimly voice. But every time those 2 hours behind was still late by her mother's standards. Mom? There was a pause and a female voice instantly awake. Tiffany, is that you? Oh, my baby, I'm hoping you call me. I miss you so much. Words came pouring out like a flood. It must be 1 in the morning there. Is something wrong? How's your grandmother? Is she okay? No mention of Dad. Mom, I miss you. Tiffany called in bed, hugging the pillow. She fought back tears. too, baby. I'm glad you called. What's wrong? Mom, a lot. I just broke up with my boyfriend. I'm losing my friends. Dad's mad at me. School's bad. I hate it. You got a boyfriend? What's his name? Sniffling Tony rolled over to get more comfort on my bed. Tony. But he dumped me because something about Julia and his father not wanting to pay taxes and bracelets. Dad hates me and your father doesn't hate you. Yes, he does. You don't know him anymore. Ever since you left. Tiffany couldn't continue. I'm sorry, honey, was all Claudia could find to say. Why'd you leave, Mom? Everything was fine, then you left with that white guy. You shouldn't have done that. All the emotion of the evening's events were come pouring out of her. Tiffany, things are not alright. Your father and I weren't even talking about it. I was a roommate more than a wife. And then in the background, Tiffany could hear a man's voice. Something. Claudia's finding the hushed tone. Tiffany, you're upset. This is not the time to talk about this. Can we? Mom, I'm sorry. I'm upset. Can I come out there? A couple hours ago, Tiffany never had actually asking such a thing. But reality and naturally of changing one's priorities. Another pause. My husband first. Tony, we want to see you, but I have something to tell you first. Another pause. Tiffany, I'm going to have a baby. But I don't want you to think. That was all Tiffany heard. Hurt, anger, upset, and a half dozen other emotions made it slam the phone down. And she then disconnected it, finishing all potential lines of communication. Her mother was pregnant with another man's baby. A little half brother or sister. She knew she had lost her mother a long time ago, but now, as far as she was concerned, dirt had finally been thrown on the grave. Her mother had started a new life in another city, with another man, soon, with another child. Alone in her room, she cried herself to sleep. The world was a terrible place with terrible people in it, and there was nothing she could do about it. The morning came way too over Tiffany's comfort. And to her expectations, she did not have a restful night. Every squeak, every groan in the house, every thump of the furnace made her imagine her father walk into her room, ready to wreak severe yelling of a paternal nature. But after a late-night phone call, she didn't care anymore. It would take concern and effort, things she was dangerously low in. Sundays, like Saturdays, were meant for sleeping in. Somehow it felt morally wrong to be awake, wide awake at 8 o'clock. Whatever her father had in mind, Tiffany hoped her grandmother would be a calming influence. Stealing her clothes from the night before. Tiffany took out her history textbook and started leafing through it. She had some sort of test sometime this week. Maybe she also thought later studiously reading might impress her father and reduce his anger. It was a possibility, however limited. No different than buying a lottery ticket or playing the slot machine. Odds are you wouldn't win a dime. It was literally 1,000,000 to 1. But there was a statistical probability that you could come up lucky. So Tiffany found the chapter they covered on Thursday and began reading. Right now, that possibility was all she had. Almost immediately, her door opened, and there stood her father. Tiffany swallowed hard but did not speak. Keith looked at his daughter. He was losing control of her and didn't know what to do about it, but he had to start somewhere. Where were you last night? I was out. Roger said Tiffany knew her answer would be insufficient. In fact, she had thought about it. She would have found a less conventional way of responding. But now it was too late. Don't be smart. Didn't I send you to your room to stay? He asked. His voice was oddly calm, almost like they were having a real conversation. Yes, you did, but I had something to do. Like what? Tony and I broke up. That should make you happy. Right now, I don't care. I thought I grounded you. Well, now no place to go anymore. You got your wish. Happy? I don't want to hear any more out of your mouth. You're failing school. You're skipping on this family. I won't let this happen. I want to tell you something. I expect you to pay attention. I'm your father, and you will do what I say. Yeah, that worked so well with Mom, didn't it? Both of their voices were rising. Leave your mother out of this. She's gone, and that's history. As for you, you will stay in this room all day for the next month, study and gain those grades up. Just to show you, and just so you know, I'm putting a more permanent screen on that window. What's the point, Dad? It doesn't matter. I'm a bad student. I know it, you know it, my teachers know it. You might as well get used to it. Heck, I will. 6 weeks in, I don't be raising a lazy daughter. Keith grabbed a pile of school books that were scattered on the bed and dumped them angry at her bed. Tiff tried to find the right words to express herself, but a stunned silence all she could generate. Her father called her lazy, and meant it. Keith reached in and snatched a jean jacket from where Tiffany had thrown 8 hours earlier. He tossed it to her. Hey, you're gonna need this. Why, I thought I was gonna stay in this room for the rest of my life. You have chores. Come with me. Keith grabbed her right arm and pulled out the room towards the front door. Keith said there was nothing under the both burst in the morning sun. There, in the driveway, was a father's aging blue Ford pickup, looking worn and muddy as usual. Beside the truck was a hose, a bucket, and a sponge. Tiffany knew what was coming. We'll find out what is that coming tomorrow. Thanks everyone for joining me. Any questions, sure let me know. Other than that, I'll talk to everyone again at the exact same time tomorrow. Till then, have a good night, miigwech, and bye for now.